What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Toma Todito Boxing Show. And, speechless. In a certain sense of the word, I am speechless after having witnessed Vasily Lomachenko's performance yesterday. Leading into the fight, watching a lot of the stuff in the lead up, the rise and fall of Lomachenko, the once great Lomachenko, stuff like that I kept seeing in the lead up. And a lot of people thinking that George Kambosos was going to perform differently, that George Kambosos was going to, in a certain way, quote unquote, pull off the upset. He's a professional. He's reached those similar heights to what Vasily Lomachenko reached, professionally speaking, as far as belts, collecting belts is concerned, especially with his victory over Teofimo Lopez, where he collected the majority of the belts. And similar stance to what Vasily Lomachenko had accomplished in the lightweight division, short one title. George Kambosos, always a fun fighter, fast hands, decent footwork, good pop, tends to fight in and out, adopted a little bit of the Manny Pacquiao style of attack and ebb and flow from the years that he spent, or the time that he spent as a sparring partner to Manny Pacquiao, and has tweaked his style slightly. What version of George Kambosos were we going to see yesterday was the question, and how was he going to overcome the older, slower Vasily Lomachenko, as perception would lead you to believe, and commentary would lead you to believe prior to the fight, stepping into this fight. Lomachenko has lost a step. Lomachenko has lost his power. Lomachenko's not there anymore. People have figured out the matrix. All these narratives. So leading up to the fight, as the announcements were taking place and the walkouts are happening, I'm communicating with a couple of my buddies who are elsewhere, other states, from around the U.S., watching the fight in different time zones, but everybody tuned in at the edge of their seat, waiting to see if we were going to witness the resurgence of George Kambosos, or if we were going to witness magic by Vasily Lomachenko. And what we got was vintage Loma, a performance where he didn't wait this time. We saw it happen with Teo. Remember, Loma's been out since the Devin Haney matchup. It's a year. That layoff had also affected him with Teofimo Lopez. When that fight happened between them. And with Devin Haney, even though a lot of people dispute that decision, Devin Haney did get the decision victory. A lot of people to this day say that Lomachenko won that. And I could see why. I could see their arguments why. You guys know, you guys could go back on the catalog. I don't go back on my word. That, when I score that fight and I rewatch that fight, I had it for Devin Haney. It's a controversial one. It's a tight one. It was really a scoring nightmare in several rounds. And people will lead you to believe that Lomachenko outpunched, outbeat, outpointed Devin Haney, and they will put highlights of that throughout social media of Loma's key moments and highlights favoring Lomachenko. If you just go biased based, or you just go by those highlights, you're gonna have a biased point of view. When you watch the fight, the argument for Devin Haney, the fact that he was attacking when Lomachenko was taking time off throughout the rounds. Lomachenko would have spurts, found a lot of success. It was a tight scoring matchup. But Devin Haney did not get a gift, in my opinion. Devin Haney did enough to have gotten the victory on that night. The Teofimo one was another one, a very telling one, where Lomachenko, in my opinion, took off the first portion of the fight. And Teofimo was dominant, where you could not ignore that first portion of the fight as to what he was doing. And then down the stretch, Teofimo picked it up again, especially in the closing round. So you could definitely see how the judges that are ringside are going to get a little bit of that recency bias that you guys hear me continue to mention here throughout the episodes. And when there's big crowds that favor one fighter over the other, well, whenever their favorite fighter does anything or throws anything of note or partially lands, the crowd erupts. And those reactions tend to weigh on the judges as well. They're human. It happens. A lot of times when we see scorecards that are just completely one-sided, and we start calling it even here on the episodes, where we're like, what the hell were they watching? It's almost like they had turned in their scorecard before the fight even started. They were already dead set on who was going to win. What fight did they watch? Well, that wasn't the case with those fights. Not in my opinion, at least. But again, it's just an opinion. So the narrative was that Lomachenko had lost a step, that people had figured him out because of those performances. Of course, the one that everybody ignores is the Orlando Salido one, which was the second professional fight, where Orlando Salido welcomed him to the pro ranks by muddying the waters, dirtying up the fight, where Lomachenko famously says after the fight, he's like, I didn't know you could do all this. He's like, all right, I got you. And he sought after that rematch, and it never happened. He wanted that. He wanted to run that back because Salido, in a way, embarrassed him, humiliated him. This is your big star? And he was just low blows, illegal blows, punches behind the head, elbows, forearms, rabbit punching, holding, dirty boxing along the ropes, you name it. If you go back and watch that fight, it was such a frustrating fight to watch. If you were a Loma fan, it was such an entertaining fight to watch. If you were pulling for Salido, because it was kind of like sticking the finger to the organizations and to the promotional company. Like, I'm a journeyman fighter. I've challenged for titles, and you threw me in here as a stepping stone. But people ignore that because Lomachenko, again, it was his second professional fight. He had one loss as an amateur to Selimov, a fight that he avenged twice over. Selimov never turned pro. And that was the only blemish out of the 397 fights that Lomachenko had as an amateur. He won 396 of them. The only blemish was against Selimov. And when he turned pro, two-time gold medalist, yeah, the sky was the limit for him and everybody was tuned in. Loma would go on, if you look at his resume, name after name after name after name. The people that would stay away from him. Yuriorkis Gamboa never got to mix it in with them. Terrence Crawford was a lightweight at the time that Lomachenko was coming up the ranks. That fight never happened. The Mikey Garcia fight never happened with Loma. The Tank Davis fight never happened with Loma. Leo Santa Cruz never happened with Loma. Guys that were campaigning on or around those same weight classes. And they just wouldn't happen. For one reason or another. Nonetheless, champion after champion, contender, number one contender, prospects, you name it, he defeated them. And his record and his resume is as solid as ever. Now improved 18-3 with 12 knockouts, and he stopped George Kambosos. He had not gotten a stoppage victory since his victory over Nakatani back in 2021 when he stopped Masayoshi Nakatani. Just wiped the floor with him. Vintage Loma at his best. Don't knock on George Kambosos' effort, though. A very entertaining fight when it started. What versions were we going to see? And if you went by the narratives, you might as well have selected George Kambosos. When I was speaking to my buddies, like I was mentioning earlier, they picked George Kambosos. And one of them even told me, I don't see it as an upset. I don't know why you're saying that, because I asked, do you think we're going to see an upset, or are we going to see a boxing lesson by Loma? And he said, I don't know why you're calling it an upset. Kambosos is a solid fighter and a really good fighter. It would be a solid win for him, but not pulling off an upset. I held back on my counter to that. Enjoy the fight. The fight went on. And Kambosos, similar to what Nettie did early last week, started good with the body work. It was evident, even throughout the later rounds, it was evident that George Kambosos had power on his side. He was the stronger puncher of the two. But the more accurate, the more efficient, the accumulation that Lomachenko landed with, the efficiency that he landed with, how composed he stayed, the angles. It's one thing that those of you that have followed me from the beginning, when you've heard me cover Lomachenko fights, you hear me say this over and over and over. His dad trains him and Usyk exactly the same. And Usyk does the same thing that Lomachenko does as a heavyweight. And he did it as a cruiserweight, and it gives Usyk success time and again. And more evident, he did that same strategy against Anthony Joshua. Usyk lines up his lead foot to that of his opponent's lead foot. So by the time the opponent is throwing, he gets out of the way by stepping outside of the lead foot and out of the incoming power of the right hand. He tends to line up with their lead foot, which happens to be their left foot. He did it again. Lomachenko did it yesterday. We see it with Usyk, very evident, because it's a little bit slower motion. With Lomachenko, it was super evident when he beat Nakatani, and every fight after that, I started noticing it. He had trouble with Teofimo doing that because of the fast footwork of Teofimo. Same thing with Devin Haney. They move a lot, so he was never really able to line up with them. And when he did, he would find success. Loma would. Yesterday, he had a stationary target for the most part, a stationary target with decent footwork, but not excellent footwork, but fast hands. So he had to worry about those hands. If he was going to control those hands, he was going to have to work angles. And he did, lined up himself with Kambosos' lead foot, would bounce to the right, which was outside the range of Kambosos, or his left. So by the time he was throwing the right to Lomachenko, Loma would already be out of range. And either would duck under Kambosos' left hand and land some power on there, either a looping hook or uppercut or to the body, or would counter with a left on Kambosos' reset. And that's how he controlled him, with angles. Feigning to his right, underneath Kambosos' arm, and then peppering him over and over and over. Lomachenko's accumulation of punches began to mark up Kambosos. Whenever Kambosos would start countering to the body, especially, his body work was amazing yesterday. I've never seen Kambosos, so now we could credit Kambosos to the fact that he added something new to his arsenal. That body work that he was doing on Loma was great. He was marking him up. You would see how evident Lomachenko's ribs were marked up. His ribs, his abs, his stomach, everything was just red, like red, just getting beat. And even though it wasn't an accumulation of punches by Kambosos, his punches were landing, and were landing effectively. And you would see the reactions of Lomachenko when he would get hit to the body, even down the stretch, 8th, 9th round. He was hurting Loma to the body. When Kambosos would break out of his shell and press forward, he would find success. He just didn't realize it during the fight, or his corner failed to tell him. Or maybe he was in too much pain. But the few moments that Kambosos had where he looked great in the fight was when he pressed forward. the rest of the time that he spent on the back foot and stepping away from Loma, Loma dominated. Lomachenko did not wait like he did with Teofimo and Devin Haney. He did not wait to get started. He did not wait to adjust to his opponent's game plan and figure out what their strategy was. He took the fight to him from the opening bell. He got hit in the body and he was like, all right, game on, and started. And we witnessed vintage Loma, a resurgence of the great Lomachenko last night. He improves to 18-3 with 12 knockouts. Kambosos gets the third loss of his career. 2 to Devin Haney, and now a stoppage loss at the hands of Lomachenko. The fight was called off in the 11th round with a great body shot, perfectly landed body shot by Lomachenko, which folded Kambosos, dropping him to a knee, and the fight being called. Lomachenko is the IBO and IBF lightweight champion of the world, the title that eluded Lomachenko on that fateful night against Teofimo Lopez, the final piece to becoming undisputed back then, and it all went away because of that decision loss to Teofimo. And since then, he's been climbing himself back up, came up short against Devin Haney, and this IBF title that caused this whole whirlwind, this downward spiral, he finally conquered it. He stayed the course and has now conquered it and is at the top of the lightweight division as the newest crowned champion. In 1 week's time, we're going to have Navarrete and Denis Berinchyk fight for the WBO title out in San Diego. That's the final piece to all 4 belts being occupied once again at the lightweight division. Tank Davis got elevated as a WBA champ. Shakur Stevenson, supposed to be retired, now fighting in July. He's the current WBC champion. Lomachenko, IBF and IBO. And Navarrete or Berinchyk, one of those two will be crowned as WBO champion in a week's time. For Loma, the landscape is wide open. Navarrete, potential, top-rank stablemate. Shakur, potential, top-rank stablemate. Tank, tweeting or messaging on X, because it's not Twitter anymore. There's no more tweets. So these posts on X, he posted, Loma's next. That's my next opponent. Leonard Ellerby followed up with those comments. Loma was asked at the post-fight press conference, and he said he just wants to take time off, and then he'll revisit those ideas. A fight that Lomachenko chased and chased and chased from 130, and when he arrived to 135, and everybody stayed quiet on the Tank side. Now Tank called him out. Way to keep his name in conversation, because he's got that fight coming up against Frank Martin, and a tough fight, a tough task for Tank Davis, and for Frank Martin for that matter. George Kambosos is not quite at the gatekeeper level yet, but I hope that they work his career perfectly. He needs to take some time off, reset, re-engage, and not get into a top name, but fight some prospects. Maybe Keyshawn Davis, don't go after Shakur. Don't continue to take these. If it's a payday thing, yes, go after the top dogs and that's it. But fight a Jojo Diaz, who's still getting fights with lightweights. If he doesn't go down to 130, which I hope he does, because he'll be able to have a bit of a resurgence of his career as he's closing his career, Jojo Diaz is. But George Kambosos, take on the prospects. Take on the guys that are still looming around and get some wins under your belt. Fight a Jose Pedraza. Fight Keyshawn Davis. Fight Jermaine Ortiz if he comes back to 135. Maybe be a tough test for Emiliano Vargas, who's coming up. Maybe too soon. Or Abdullah Mason. But there's plenty of competition there. Get some good wins under your belt before you take on another big name. Because you struggled against Maxie Hughes, and this was a whole different level and a whole different beast. And you came up short and now got your first stoppage. I don't think we've seen the best of George Kambosos, but I think he's pretty close to hitting the ceiling as far as improvement goes. I think he's reaching it. For Lomachenko, he's going to take time off. The landscape is wide open for him. He's in a different position. He's older at 36, but he looked amazing. He's in a whole different position. Tank Davis, if he's successful over Frank Martin, that would be a great fight. I just don't see Bob Arum and Tank or PBC working together. If they do, amazing for the fans and possibly the biggest gate this year. It would outwork everybody. Tank and Loma would be huge. If he fights the winner of Navarrete and Berinchyk, which seems like it's going to be the most viable option, maybe later this year, whether it be Berinchyk or Navarrete, that would be a super viable option as well. Easy fight to make for Top Rank. Big unification bout where now all of a sudden Loma would end up with a second title if he's successful on that one. Whoever the opponent is, interesting fight. If he fights Shakur, Shakur wants out of the Top Rank contract, but if they get him a Loma to keep him, smart move by Bob Arum, that would be a great fight in the second half of this year. Maybe October fight, November. So, very, very interesting fight. The fast hands, the decent footwork, the combinations of George Kambosos came up short against the angles, the indirects, the reaction time, the output, the footwork, masterful footwork by Lomachenko. Kambosos' effort came up short. He is stopped in the 11th round, and Lomachenko is back at the top of the lightweight division, or one of the tops in the lightweight division, in the company of Tank, Shakur, and a new champion to be crowned for the WBO in a week's time. So I leave you guys with that. I'm interested to see what you guys thought of the fight. I'm interested to see if you guys noticed what I noticed as well. Both how Lomachenko dominated by lining himself up with the opponent's lead foot, which eliminates pretty much the majority of the weapons from his opponent's behalf. And if you guys noticed that the power was actually benefiting and on the side of Kambosos, who was damaging Loma's body. I'm curious to hear from you guys. So as soon as you guys know this episode's up, those of you that don't follow me on Instagram, please go over there, start following me on Instagram, help me grow that page. And when you see those posts, communicate with me on there. Find me on X, you could communicate with me there as well. And listen, what a great fight, what a great showing. And these are fighters that come once in a while, and they're fighters that we got to be able to appreciate and enjoy while we have them actively competing. And that is a Vasily Lomachenko, that is a Tank, a Terence Crawford. Those are special figures within the sport of boxing, and rarities within the sport of boxing. So I leave you guys with that. Have yourself a blessed night, a great night, and I'll catch you guys all on the next episode. Thank you for all the follows, for all the love, and we'll continue pushing forward. Take care of yourselves. Have a great night.